Dhammapada verse 6 Kosambaka Vatu. Per ca na vijananti mayametha yamamase squared ye ca tattha vianant tato samanti medhaga. Verse 6. People, other than the wise, do not realize, we in this world must all die, and, not realizing it, continue their quarrels. The wise realize it and thereby their quarrels cease. 1. Per ca na vijananti. Per means others, in this context, people other than the wise. These people do not realize that they must die, and behave as if they were never going to die and keep on quarreling. Therefore, they are sometimes referred to as the ignorant or the foolish, or those who are not worthy of love and respect. 2. Mayametha yamamase, lit. We here must die, meaning we, of this world, must die, or all men are mortal. 3. Ye ca tattha vijananti. In the case of those who understand, meaning the wise. The wise understand, or realize, that all men are mortal. The story of Kosambi Bhikkhus. While residing at the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, the Buddha uttered verse 6 of this book, with reference to the bhikkhus of Kosambi. The bhikkhus of Kosambi had formed into two groups. One group followed the master of Vinaya and the other followed the teacher of the Dhamma, and they were often quarreling among themselves. Even the Buddha could not stop them from quarreling. So he left them and spent the Vasa, residence period of the rains, all alone in Rakita Grove near Palalayaka forest. There, the elephant Palalaya waited upon the Buddha. The lay disciples of Kosambi, on learning the reason for the departure of the Buddha, refused to make offerings to the remaining bhikkhus. This made them realize their mistake and reconciliation took place among themselves. Still, the lay disciples would not treat them as respectfully as before, until they owned up their fault to the Buddha. But the Buddha was away and it was in the middle of the Vasa, so the bhikkhus of Kosambi spent the Vasa in misery and hardship. At the end of the Vasa, the Venerable Ananda and 500 bhikkhus approached the Buddha and gave the message from Anathapindika and other lay disciples imploring him to return. In due course the Buddha returned to the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi. The bhikkhus followed him there, fell down at his feet, and owned up their fault. The Buddha rebuked them for disobeying him. He told them to remember that they must all die someday and therefore, they must stop their quarrels and must not act as if they would never die. Then the Buddha spoke in verse as follows. Verse 6. People, other than the wise, do not realize, we in this world must all die, and, not realizing it, continue their quarrels. The wise realize it and thereby their quarrels cease. At the end of the discourse, all the assembled bhikkhus were established in Sotapatti fruition. Dhammapada verses 7 and 8 Mahakalathara Vatu. Subhanupasim Viharantam Indri Yesu Asamvutam Bojanami Kamatanam Kusatam Hinaviriam Tam Ve Pasahati Maro, Vato Rukumva Dubalam. Asubhanupasim Viharantam Indri Yesu Susamvutam Bojanami Ca Matanam. Satam Aradavarayam Tam Ve Napasahati Maro Vato Salamva Pabatam. Verse 7. He who keeps his mind on pleasant objects, who is uncontrolled in his senses, immoderate in his food, and is lazy and lacking in energy, will certainly be overwhelmed by Mara, just as stormy winds uproot a weak tree. Verse 8. He who keeps his mind on the impurities of the body, who is well controlled in his senses and is full of faith and energy, will certainly be not overwhelmed by Mara, just as stormy winds cannot shake a mountain of rock. 1. Mara. In this context Kilesamara, the defilements hindering the realization of Nibbana. 2. Satta, according to the commentary. A unwavering, unshakable faith in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the doctrine, and the Samgal, the Buddhist religious order, and b. faith or belief in karma, action and its results. 3. Refer to 1. The story of Thera Mahakala. While residing in the neighborhood of the town of Setebia, the Buddha uttered verses 7 and 8 of this book, with reference to Mahakala and his brother Kalakala. Mahakala and Kalakala were two merchant brothers from the town of Setebia. While traveling about with their merchandise on one occasion, they had a chance to listen to a religious discourse given by the Buddha. After hearing the discourse, Mahakala asked the Buddha for admission to the order of the bhikkhus. Kalakala also joined the order, but with the intention of coming out of the order and to bring out his brother along with him. Mahakala was serious in his ascetic practice at the cemetery, Sosanika Dutinga, and diligently meditated on decay and impermanence. He finally gained insight and attained arahatship. Later, the Buddha and his disciples, including the brothers, happened to be staying in the forest of Simsapa, near Setebia. While staying there, the former wives of Kalakala invited the Buddha and his disciples to their house. Kalakala himself went ahead to prepare seating arrangements for the Buddha and his disciples. Once there, the former wives of Kalakala made him change into lay clothes. The next day, the wives of Mahakala invited the Buddha and his disciples to their house, hoping to do the same with Mahakala as the wives of Kalakala had done to Kalakala. After the meal, they requested the Buddha to let Mahakala remain to express appreciation, anumodana. So the Buddha and the other disciples left. Arriving at the village gate, the bhikkhus expressed their dissatisfaction and apprehension. They were dissatisfied because Mahakala was permitted to stay behind, and they were afraid that, like Kalakala, his brother, Mahakala, too, would be made to leave the order by his former wives. To this, the Buddha replied that the two brothers were not alike. Kalakala indulged in sensual pleasures and was lazy and weak. He was just like a weak tree. Mahakala, on the other hand, was diligent, steadfast and strong in his faith of the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. He was like a mountain of rock. Then the Buddha spoke in verse as follows. Verse 7. He who keeps his mind on pleasant objects, who is uncontrolled in his senses, immoderate in his food, and is lazy and lacking in energy, will certainly be overwhelmed by Mara, just as stormy winds uproot a weak tree. Verse 8. He who keeps his mind on the impurities of the body, who is well controlled in his senses and is full of faith and energy, will certainly be not overwhelmed by Mara, just as stormy winds cannot shake a mountain of rock. Meanwhile, the former wives of Mahakala surrounded him and tried to remove his yellow robes. The Thera, sensing their attitude, stood up and, rising up into the air by his supernormal powers, passed through the roof of the house into the sky. He landed at the feet of the Buddha at the very moment the master was coming to the end of his utterance of the above two stanzas. At the same time, all the bhikkhus assembled there were established in Sotapatti fruition.